Welcome, mystery and the unknown enthusiasts, to our special today, where we venture into the shadows of seemingly ordinary homes to unveil spine-chilling tales of dark family secrets. Join us as we unravel chilling accounts and hidden truths that dwell in the darkest corners of family bonds. Before we embark on our nocturnal journey, remember to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss any of our videos, and show your support by leaving a like. This helps us bring even more haunting stories to uncover together. I had a peaceful and prosperous life as the owner of my own business in the southern United States, but everything changed when I began unraveling a dark secret surrounding my father's death. He and my mother were high school sweethearts, and after graduating from Penn State, they married and settled in Florida, where my sister and I were born. My childhood was idyllic until my mother fell ill with cancer and passed away shortly before my graduation. My father, after a period of mourning, found solace in a support group where he met Laura, who had also lost her husband. They fell in love and married quickly. Initially, the marriage seemed to heal my father's broken heart, but things soon started to change. Laura convinced my father to buy an expensive lakeside house, forcing him to work harder to maintain the luxurious lifestyle. With my father frequently absent, Laura began relying on a wealthy single neighbor for assistance with small tasks, a situation my father naively accepted. Their relationship crumbled when my father discovered that Laura was having an affair with the neighbor. After the revelation, they separated, and my father allowed Laura to continue living in the lakeside house until the divorce was finalized. Laura made several attempts to seduce my father back, but my sister and I managed to persuade him to stick to his decision. Everything tragically changed when my father was found dead in his home, with a gunshot wound that appeared to be self-inflicted. At the time, I accepted the police's conclusion that he had committed suicide, especially after a conversation in which he expressed despair. But Laura's actions after his death began to raise suspicions. She did not attend the funeral and avoided our family, and when we finally spoke, she insisted that my father often talked about taking his own life, something I had never heard before. I began investigating Laura's life and uncovered a disturbing pattern. She grew up without a father and was raised by an alcoholic mother. After high school, she worked as a dancer in a nightclub and lived a fast-paced lifestyle of drinking and drugs. She married a wealthy man who died in a car accident, an event that raised suspicions among his friends. After spending all of the inheritance, Laura sought a new sugar daddy and found my father. After my father's death, Laura lived comfortably in the lakeside house as his legal widow. Her lack of reaction to my father's passing and her behavior after his death raised even more suspicions. I hired a private investigator to look into it and found damning information. I am convinced that Laura played a role in my father's death and am working to gather enough evidence to reopen the case. My sister and I are determined to seek justice for our father. The investigation is nearing its end, and things do not look good for Laura. I am torn between the relief of potentially bringing justice to my father and the anguish of unearthing a painful past. I met my best friend, whom we'll call Kai, in 2006 after my father was transferred to a new city. On the first day of school, while my mom was talking to the principal, Kai was in the principal's office for getting into a fight. Despite the blood on his nose, we started talking and quickly became friends. Our houses were about a mile apart, and I would often bike to his house. Life at Kai's house seemed amazing. His parents were college professors and had a liberal approach to raising their children. Kai and his brother had a lot of freedom, but I soon realized that, for Kai, this freedom was more like a prison. It didn't take long for me to notice the bruises and black eyes on Kai, which I initially attributed to frequent school fights. Over time, I realized the truth was different. I saw Kai's older brother physically abusing him, and it became clear that the abuse was constant and unprovoked. Kai's parents ignored his pleas for help, saying that boys will be boys. The domestic abuse led him to get into fights at school, in an attempt to regain some lost power at home. He always picked the biggest opponent and never regretted the fights, even though he rarely won. Kai seemed to have a split personality, aggressive in fights but kind and calm with me. If I hadn't seen this side of him, I would never have believed it existed. He was like family to me, but I always feared that beast hidden beneath the surface. As the years went by, the situation at Kai's house remained the same. The abuse escalated to the point where Kai ended up in the hospital several times. When his brother went to college, Kai's life improved significantly, the fights stopped, and he even made the honor roll. Then, everything fell apart in December. I received a call from Kai, telling me that his brother had been in a serious accident and was in a coma. Against all odds, Kai's brother survived, but with severe brain damage. Kai seemed devastated by the event, despite the long history of abuse. When we reunited years later, Kai made a shocking confession. We were drunk and sitting on the stairs where the accident happened, and Kai admitted that he had pushed his brother on that fateful night. It wasn't planned, but it happened in the heat of the moment. Kai explained that after his brother went away to college, he could finally relax for the first time in his life. But when his brother came back for Christmas and confronted him, Kai reacted. After this confession, our relationship changed. I didn't know what to do with this information. Kai eventually passed away years later, and now that he's gone, I feel it's time to reveal the truth. I never told anyone about our conversation, but now that Kai is no longer with us, I think it's important to share his story. Kai's confession left me with a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt sympathy for everything he had gone through. On the other, I was horrified by the reality of his actions. Kai's passing closed a chapter in my life, but also opened up a chasm of questions and reflections on the complexity of human nature and the dark secrets we can carry. I live in a place called Dark Hollow, about 20 minutes from Pittsburgh. It's a lovely neighborhood, full of trees and greenery, with some beautiful old houses. Despite the privilege of growing up there was a significant downside: the Ward family. They were the neighborhood's nightmare, making life unbearable for almost every other family. Individually, they were bad enough, but collectively, they were like a horror movie. Winston and Wendy Ward, the patriarch, was peculiarly disturbing. Being a teenage girl, I always felt a special discomfort in his presence. He was excessively polite to me, bordering on strange flirtation, but a true monster to boys or men. Once, he nearly attacked my older brother with a baseball bat over a minor infraction. Maggie, Wendy's wife, was a dark figure in her own right. With heavy makeup and overly plucked eyebrows, she looked much older than she actually was. Famous for sitting on the porch and knitting, she seemed more in a trance than actually doing something productive. The creepiest part was hearing her sing nursery rhymes slowly and deliberately, turning them into something sinister. The younger son, Jacob, was obsessed with Native American culture in a toxic way. I rarely saw him without his face painted or some homemade headdress. He would run around the neighborhood with a bow and arrow, and many swore they saw him using real arrows. Some residents even called a social worker after seeing Jacob with dead animals, but I'm not sure if that resulted in anything. The older son, Johnny, was even more disturbing. Expelled from high school for aggressive behavior, he did something seriously scary to a girl who rejected his invitation for a date. He hid in her car and scared her so much that she had an accident and had to be hospitalized. The police merely issued a warning for him to stay away from her, considering it a teenage prank. When a for sale sign finally appeared on the Ward house, the community breathed a sigh of relief. After they left, they became a sort of urban legend in Dark Hollow. It's still a miracle that nothing more serious happened involving the Wards, but the question will always linger. What would have happened if they had stayed longer? And what are they doing now, wherever they may have moved to? Perhaps it's only a matter of time until something more sinister comes to light. I was recently contacted by a childhood friend, Julia, with whom I hadn't been in touch for 20 years. We were neighbors and best friends until a bizarre incident tore us apart. I'll try to retell this episode to the best of my ability, although I was only 10 years old at the time, and the older people who could provide more details are no longer around. I grew up in a very poor area in a small town in Missouri. Julia's house was close to mine, and her parents were always very kind, albeit a bit peculiar. They were extremely religious, more so than any other family I knew. Julia was homeschooled by her mother, which was strange to me as I had never heard of homeschooling before meeting her. Everything seemed normal until a few weeks before my 11th birthday when a shocking event occurred. One Friday morning, I was woken up by flashing blue and red lights through the curtains. I looked out the window and saw several police cars in front of Julia's house. My parents told me not to worry, but I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened. After school, I rushed home and went straight to Julia's house, but there was no answer. When my mother got home, I was a wreck. It took her a while to calm me down, and then she told me the truth. Most of what I know was pieced together afterward, but my mother had the basic details. That afternoon, she was approached by an FBI agent who asked about Julia's family. The agent revealed that Julia had been abducted from a Walmart store in Oklahoma when she was only 4 years old. Her kidnappers had managed to stay one step ahead of the police for years until they were finally tracked down. In the days that followed, we discovered more shocking details. My father found a newspaper article about Julia's abduction. The man who had kidnapped her had lost his own daughter in a hit-and-run accident. His wife was inconsolable, and fearing she might take her own life, he kidnapped Julia to replace his lost daughter. They raised Julia as their own, but they knew what they had done was wrong. After 20 years, Julia returned to her biological family. I never expected to hear from her again, so I was shocked and delighted by her message. We're trying to arrange a meeting to catch up. If she's willing to share more about her life during those years, I'm sure it will be a fascinating story. Today, at 37 years old, I am a business owner in the southern United States. I have found love again, after a failed marriage and a tumultuous past, in the form of my fiancée. We met at church, and over the past 2 years, our relationship has flourished in ways I never imagined possible. But there is a dark secret from my past that I have not yet revealed to her, something that completely altered the course of my life. I have been honest about most of my past, including my struggle with alcoholism, which was the primary reason for the failure of my first marriage. However, there is a specific incident that has remained hidden. I started drinking at the age of 15, stealing liquor from my parents' liquor cabinet. Although I learned to control my drunken behavior, I ended up in car accidents, the last of which changed my life forever. At 24 years old, after a night of heavy drinking, I was involved in a fatal car accident. I was completely drunk and collided head-on with another vehicle. The driver, a 22-year-old young mother, and her 19-month-old son did not survive. I walked away with minor injuries, but that night, I became a double murderer. The next day, as I sobered up in a jail cell, I made a promise to God that I would never touch alcohol again. I have kept that promise to this day. I accepted a 9-year prison sentence, knowing it was more than fair given the gravity of my actions. In prison, I dedicated myself to rehabilitation programs and worked to become a better person. I quit drinking, and despite the challenges, I never gave up. I was released early after serving 6 years and completed the remainder of my sentence on parole. Since then, my life has been a constant struggle for redemption and improvement. I became an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, sponsoring other alcoholics, and became involved in my local church where I met my fiancée. Now, I am faced with a dilemma. Should I tell her about the fatal accident and risk losing everything we have built together, or should I keep this secret and hope she never finds out? I am inclined to be honest, but I fear that this revelation could destroy our relationship. The truth is a heavy burden, and hiding it from her has been distressing. I seek guidance as I am torn between the desire to be honest and the fear of losing the person I love. This secret is a shadow that haunts me, and despite turning my life around for the better, I still grapple with the consequences of my past actions. What should I do? Growing up without a deep understanding of one's family history always left me with a sense of emptiness. My grandmother was a central figure in my life, but it wasn't until her death in 2015 that I realized how little I truly knew about her. The story I uncovered in 2021 during a major Texas freeze that left us stuck at home forever changed the image I had of her. My grandmother used to fly and to spend major holidays with us, and it was during these times that we had opportunities to talk. She was the one who knew our family history, and I longed to hear it all, but something always got in the way. When she passed away, I thought the chance to uncover our past had disappeared. But on that cold winter night in 2021, isolated and with not much else to do, my father decided to share a family story that few knew. During the day, we took care of the animals and helped the neighbors, but at night, under the glow of lanterns and candles, we sought ways to entertain ourselves. That's when my father began to tell stories of his childhood and the escapades he and my mother experienced. Somehow, the conversation led to my grandmother, and that's when he revealed a secret she had never shared. He hesitated at first, but after my insistence, he began to recount. It was 1968, and my mother, born in a small town in Indiana, was the daughter of a strict preacher. Her life changed when she met Daryl Mitchell, a troubled young man whom she fell deeply in love with. Their romance was a secret to everyone except for an intimate group of friends. When her parents found out, they forced her to end the relationship, but the couple continued to meet in secret and planned to run away together. The escape would have been successful had it not been for the school's concern about my mother's sudden absence. The truth came to light, and a statewide alert was issued. The couple was already in Illinois but was intercepted by a patrol officer. The confrontation ended tragically, with Daryl shooting the officer and being killed by the police. My mother, though physically unharmed, was arrested and faced the possibility of being an accomplice to murder. However, the society of the time viewed her as a victim of a bad man, and she was ultimately released after a brief probationary period. Her return to the small town was difficult, with judgments and gossip. As soon as she finished high school, she moved to Dallas, where she began a new life and met my father. I listened to this story in complete shock. My grandmother, whom I had always seen as a kind elderly woman, had a dark and tragic past. It was almost unbelievable to think that the woman who told me stories and baked cookies had lived such a tumultuous and dramatic youth. The revelation made me reconsider who my grandmother truly was. She wasn't just the loving grandmother I knew, but a woman who had faced and survived one of life's darkest moments. Her past, marked by poor choices and tragic consequences, also showed her strength and resilience. Since that night, my relationship with my family's history has changed. I have a new perspective not only on my grandmother, but also on the complexity of human life. Each of us carries secrets and stories that shape who we are, and often, these stories remain hidden, just waiting to be discovered. From a young age, I always knew that life was a constant struggle. With my father having left us when I was just 5 years old, I took on the role of the man of the house very early on. Taking care of my mother and sister was my priority, and I would confront anyone who threatened our peace, regardless of the consequences. My sister was my world, and when she died in a tragic hit-and-run accident at the age of 16, it nearly destroyed us. I, at 13, did what I could to bear the pain and loss, selling everything I had to help with the funeral costs. These are just a few examples of how important family has always been to me. Now, at 18, living in Missouri, a school assignment forced me to confront a family past I never imagined existed. The task was simple: trace our family tree. However, I encountered resistance from my mother from the start. Every time I mentioned the project, she would change the subject or ignore it entirely. It was only when I mentioned a distant cousin I found on a genealogy website that the truth came to light. What my mother revealed that afternoon changed everything I knew about our family. Until the 1990s, we were a normal family. My great-grandparents came from Sweden to the United States in the 19th century and started farming a piece of land. Everything changed when my mother was around 13. My grandfather began visiting her room at night, and instead of protecting her, my grandmother blamed my mother for the abuse. My mother's twin brother, my uncle, discovered the truth after a year of ongoing abuse. He confronted my grandfather, who did not deny the accusations. In an act of anger and disgust, my uncle took a shotgun and killed my grandfather with a single shot. My grandfather's death only made things worse. My grandmother blamed my mother for what had happened, leading her to run away from home and eventually marry my father. The story of my mother's past explained why her side of the family had never been present in our lives. I had always assumed they were dead, but now I realized that my mother avoided them at all costs. My father likely knew everything, which would explain why he never mentioned her family either. Since my mother shared this terrible story, our relationship has changed. We don't talk much, and there are so many thoughts and questions in my head that I don't know what to say. Despite all my sympathy for the pain and suffering my mother endured, I can't help but wonder what else she might have hidden from me. Part of me resents her for keeping this a secret, but I know it's just my selfishness speaking. With my school assignment deadline approaching, I realize that I no longer care about it. In fact, I don't care if I graduate or not. All I can think about is my mother's story and how it has shaped the person I am today. This revelation about my family's past has left me confused and in search of answers. I'm not sure how to proceed or what to do with this information. Perhaps by sharing this story anonymously, I can find some guidance or at least lighten the burden of this truth. After all, sometimes, family can hide dark secrets that change our perception of the past and shape our future in ways we could never imagine. Every family has its secrets, some darker than others. If you got chills and were intrigued by the stories we shared today, don't forget to leave your like. Your support is crucial to continue exploring the mysteries hidden in homes around the world. And if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now and ring the bell so you won't miss any of our future videos. Thank you for joining us on this nightly journey. Remember, the deepest secrets can be hidden in the most familiar places. Until next time, it will always be a pleasure to be here with you.